Welcome to another episode of the Love and Reality Podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, I'm going to recap everything that went down on the fourth episode of the fifth season of Temptation Island. I've been really enjoying this as this season is starting to ramp up and get heated. Obviously, as we have seen with these couples starting to kind of get a little bit more comfortable, I guess you could say, kind of revealing themselves and maybe even going a little bit further. And I tell you what, folks, this episode does promise to bring some serious drama. Obviously, we pick up right where we left off last week, where Great had just watched the video of Paris talking about wanting to suck one of her singles over there's, you know what? And Mark asked how he felt about it, and he responds embarrassed. And he said that since they are together, her actions are a direct reflection of him, and it doesn't sit well with him. He also said he wonders what she is like when he always wondered what she was like when he's not around. And of course, this is how she acted, and he's hurt. Now, Roberto gets to watch a video of Vanessa talking about how she's lowered her standards to be in a relationship with Roberto. And she further goes on to say, she talks that scene that we saw that I talked about last week where, Vanessa was very critical of Roberto and what he said, but yet here she was, talking about Bryce. So he sees that scene with Bryce and talks about wanting to have a great time and give it all to him. Mark asked him what he thought of that, and he said, honestly, relieved. He said more and more every day, he's realizing that they are a terrible match. He explained further that he is happy to be finally getting to be himself. I don't think that there's any point in time where I see that Vanessa and Roberto are back together at the end of this. I just feel like these two walk away from each other at the end of this experiment. And then, of course, Hall watches Caitlin talk to somebody about how saying, you remind me of my ex and it's dangerous. Hall said he's relieved that she's taking it seriously. However, Mark calls him out saying that he is relieved because he has something going on. And of course, Hall owns up to it, saying that he has met someone special, and that is part of the relief. He was been desperately looking for someone like Michaela his entire life, that someone that opens up and lights up when talking about family. He said things are happening fast and is grateful for this opportunity. Mark announces that there will be a group date and the singles will join him on the date, but after the date, they will send one of them home. Hall says he is confused because he wants his relationship with Caitlin to work, but everything with Michaela complicates things. Over at the girls' villa, we have the girls talking to the single man about what happened at the bonfire. Of course, Caitlin mentions Hall and how it's his way or the highway for the kid situation. Maricela weighs in says the weight is lifted off her back. Paris said she's ready to have fun. I mean, hasn't she already been having fun? The guys and the girls announced to the singles that somebody will be heading home a little bit later. Vanessa sits down with Christian and asks him how he feels about things. He talks to the camera, mentioning he is nervous about things because he doesn't have anybody that he's connected with. Griffin also sits down with Caitlin, telling her he feels and likes her. Bryce said he doesn't want to rush things, and Vanessa is upset about it because of his lack of interest being standoff, and she mentions that today is an elimination day. She wants Bryce, but he isn't so sure. At the guys' villa, things get spicy between Abby and Christopher, saying she wants him to be more authentic in handling the experience. And of course, Christopher is not very good at handling that criticism, whether it's constructive or not. These two go back and forth, start yelling and screaming at each other, blah, 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 blah. Great is spicing the games up with wanting to add whipped cream to the party. He decided to start the day, be single, and not worry about Paris anymore. I wonder that has anything to do with her saying something along the lines, I want to suck that man's, yeah. Abby tries to make a move with Hall, as she knows her time is running out. Tia is also nervous. Christopher says he should have picked her from the first date. Major sits down with Roberto, and instead of throwing her name in the hat, she throws the other girls under the bus. Great sits down with Tammy, who mentions she likes him and that her feelings are real, but she's nervous he doesn't feel the same way, and we'll send him home. All right. So, elimination time. It gets a little spicy here. Vanessa's leading the way, talking about 3 people they've had an eye on. Christian, she feels like nobody felt they could make an established connection with him. Griffin, they weren't so sure who he was interested in. And Bryce, his lack of commitment, and they don't like it. She announces the person going home is Griffin. And to be honest with you, I didn't realize Griffin was on the show until this episode. So Roberto leads the way by mentioning Tia, saying he had tried to be mature with her and she mishandled it. Christopher says, Abby, things started off strong. They realized that they are both fiery individuals. Roberto talks about Major and how she hasn't formed any connections. And of course, that is who is going home. And before she could go, Major goes. She decided to throw up the pot, saying Nafisa should have been the one that left. She doesn't make any friendships on the island, and things will go off the rails with Nafisa. And Nafisa gives it back to her fiery. And these two get into a nice little pissing contest before she goes. All right. Now, we have gone to the guys' villa where things start to get a little bit more interesting across the board here, right? The girls are painting up the guys, and now it's turned into a drunk party with the girls dancing all over the guys. Tammy mentioned that her feelings are real, and she will dance all over Great however she wants. After this, Great licks stuff off Nafisa, who says Great likes the attention that Tammy gives him, but she shares a real connection with Great. Great says everyone is getting a taste tonight. Great saw the video of Paris and was like, I challenge accepted. We know that this entire scene is going to be at the next bonfire. Things are starting to get real. Roberto talks about how every day he's feeling closer and closer to Desiree. These two make out heavily on the couch together. Alexis sits down with Christopher and says she feels very vulnerable to him. He said he's excited to get to know her as he feels comfortable being around and talking to her. Nafisa walks up to Tammy and asks if she has brushed her teeth. This leads to a massive argument between Tia and Nafisa. And let's be real. Like, if you watch this episode early on, you're like, man, is she dramatic? Maybe, but maybe Major was wrong. Like, maybe she was wrong. But we're watching this unfold, and it's like, maybe she was right. Tia and Nafisa go back and forth, yelling and screaming at each other. And then, of course, we get that. What it follows is the producers ask Nafisa why everyone thinks she's a mean girl, and she says, because I am a mean girl. It follows with just joking. I'm just a real girl, and she didn't come to make friends. Tia starts to break down and cry, and it's hilarious because Great is like, literally, my guy is sitting here in the chair. You have Tia, Nafisa, and Tammy just screaming and yelling at each other. And my guy is like this. He's like, they're yelling at each other. And he's just like this the entire time. Like, it's one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in my entire life. It was funny. But she eventually chases everyone off of the table as the episode came to an end. But we're going to flip over to the girls' villa because we got a lot to talk about what happens over here. The talent show is happening. The girls announce whoever wins will get to pick a girl, and they will let them know what their prize is. Mike breaks out a rap/poem and hits a home run with the ladies, including one about Caitlin. Tahajik puts it on Paris. I mean, my boy Ty, he said, I'm going to lay it all out on the line. And they make out in the process. There ended up being a tie, which Tahajik ended up winning. And Paris says he wanted a chance to cuddle with him tonight. Paris says that she is tempted to do things with him. I mean, you did pick him to sleep with you, so I would assume it leads to these two being in bed, and they make out heavily. Again, I can imagine that this will be at the next bonfire for Great, which, who knows? I mean, they both have nothing to be mad at because now they've done a bunch of stuff that they should not have been doing. But technically, you know, they're there to learn things about each other. Caitlin tells Vanessa that she feels terrible having fun and she really likes Mike. She does feel guilty. We see Mike in her bed and he doesn't want to get out. And instead of getting in bed with him, Caitlin being very confused of what's going on, she decides to sleep on the couch instead. And that's the end part of the girls' part of the villa. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. As I watch this episode, as we hit the 4th episode mark here, I'm going to give some thoughts on the couples. Caitlin and Hall, these two seem... I feel like Michaela has entered the picture and is something that Hall wants. But I think the love for Caitlyn is too strong. I think these two are going to stay together at the end of this episode. What that looks like long term, do they get married? Do they have babies? What does that look like? I'm not 100% sure. But I think at the end of this season, they will stay together. Maricela and Christopher, I don't have a great feel for these two. You know what I mean? I feel like, with Christopher, he's opening up to Alexis, but I'm not sure how that's going to last. Paris and Great, Dunzo. These two are Dunzo. And if they're not Dunzo, they should be Dunzo. And then, of course, the same for Vanessa and Roberto. I'm really looking forward to the bonfire between Paris and Great, them seeing these clips of both of them making out and seeing the reaction of Paris getting mad at Great or vice versa when in all honesty, they both have crossed that line. But that being said, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Love and Reality Podcast, tackling Temptation Island. There's a couple of new shows on the horizon that I might dive into outside of Temptation Island. I'm very, very excited to take a look at those. Obviously, I think it's July the 14th, Too Hot to Handle is coming back, and I'm very, very excited. I will definitely be doing an episode on Too Hot to Handle. It's one of Netflix's better reality shows just because of how crazy and wild it can be. So I'm looking forward to breaking that down to an episode by episode thing. I might do a couple episodes on that. Looking forward to doing that on the podcast. But between now and then, if you could do me a favor and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it. If you're on YouTube, just subscribe to the channel. If you're on podcast platforms of any sort, please subscribe. If you can, on iTunes, Spotify, whatever it is, if you could leave a 5-star review, I would greatly appreciate it. But thank you guys so much for listening to the Love and Reality Podcast. I will be back next week to talk more temptation.